Born from a cradle of singers, Whitney Houston's destiny was almost written. She was and is one of the most wonderful voices in the world, because even though she is no longer physically here, her unmistakable tone continues to sound everywhere. Almost all the songs she performed were immediate hits, just like what happened with different interpretations that came to life again thanks to her voice. She in turn was the protagonist of a life that slipped out of her hands. Addictions created a path parallel to the success she was achieving, and both paths ended up joining in a tragic outcome. A trauma from her childhood left a great void in her adulthood that could only be filled by drugs, and that insatiable pain was so heavy that it ended up drowning her on February 11, 2012, the day Whitney Houston died. Whitney Elizabeth Houston was born on August 9, 1963 in Newark, New Jersey. Her fate as a singer was not by chance. She was the daughter of a gospel reference, C.C. Houston, who had been a vocalist for Elvis Presley and Aretha Franklin. In addition, Whitney was also the niece of another successful soul and pop singer and cousin of Dionne Warwick. From a young age, the possibility of succeeding in the world of music ran through her veins. As for her father, John Russell Houston was the head of planning for the administration of Newark's first black mayor, Ken Gibson, right at a time when there was a lot of urban corruption. She grew up in the ghetto, surrounded by the racial unrest that plagued her neighborhood in the late 60s. Everyone knew her as Nippy, a nickname her father gave her when she was just a baby. She was always his favorite, as she was the only girl and the youngest of 3 siblings. But that preferential love had a dark motive. In a documentary made about the life of singer Whitney Houston, it was claimed that she had suffered sexual abuse from her father in her childhood. The director of this documentary and his previous research said that he noticed something strange in her. He said she was always disturbed. Then, in an interview with Mary Jones, a former assistant to the singer, doubts would be removed and it would be confirmed that the abuse had indeed been true. Many attribute that this traumatic experience was what would trigger the singer's career years later. Whitney got her start as a singer in her church choir. At the New Hope Baptist at the age of 11, she also learned to play the piano. Given her ease and beautiful voice, her mother gave her singing lessons. While she continued to attend school, 4 years later, she was already singing in choirs professionally alongside her mother, Sissy. She made appearances in the choirs of important artists, like Low Rolls and Chaka Khan, always in the style of soul, blues, and jazz. By the end of the 80s, the beautiful Whitney began her career as a model, and even her photos appeared in some magazines, like 17 in 1981. But her participation in 1982 as a vocalist in the experimental funk band called Material was what attracted the attention of the first record labels. So it was in 1983 she signed with one of them and paved her way to absolute success. Anyway, Whitney would have had a chance much earlier. In 1977, she had been a backup singer on the single Life is a Party by Michael Sager Band and then on another song with Chaka Khan. At that time, her potential was obviously noticeable and she was also offered to sign with a record company, but her mother Cece prioritized her finishing high school and denied her the opportunity. The person who heard and discovered her at a presentation of the Material Band was none other than Clive Davis, the founder and president of Arista Records. With Arista, Whitney had her first commercial success, Hold Me, in a duet with singer Teddy Pendergrass. That single was on the tops of the most listened to at that time, and Whitney continued doing the same, also singing with the well-known Jermaine Jackson, continuing with appearances on television shows. Finally, in 1985, the artist consolidated herself with the release of her debut album, Whitney Houston. Her songs were played everywhere. Saving All My Love for You and How Will I Know were her big hits. The following year, her cousin Dionne Warwick emotionally handed her a Grammy for Saving All My Love for You. She sold 25 million copies worldwide, half of them in the United States alone. She began a rise that seemed to have no end. Her second album, Whitney, was released in 1987 and was as successful as her first. On her promotional tour, she sang at a concert celebrating Nelson Mandela's birthday and founded a non-profit organization with the purpose of helping needy children called the Whitney Houston Foundation. All her songs became a sensation and she surpassed her own records on the Billboard and R&B charts. Millions of her records were sold and thus her first tours began, knowing she was unstoppable. Thus began a new decade and with it a new album, the third called I'm Your Baby Tonight. 10 million copies were sold worldwide, of which 4 million were in her country, and she was awarded 4 Billboard Music Awards in 1991. An interesting fact about this was that the same year she was called to sing at the 25th Super Bowl in Florida. The song sung that night was recorded as a single that reached number 20 and became the only version of the American anthem to achieve a platinum record, and of course it was obviously a sales success. The money raised was donated to the American Red Cross in favor of Gulf War veterans and their families. Whitney always made it a point to help various organizations and foundations, especially the most vulnerable sick children with cancer or without a home. Even in 1989, she created her own foundation, the Whitney Houston Foundation for Children. The year 1992 came to make her a revelation on the big screen, along with an actor who overprotected her. Alongside Kevin Costner, she participated in the movie The Bodyguard, from which the song that no one can overlook, I Will Always Love You, is derived. She also recorded 6 new singles for the soundtrack. On the other hand, the love story of an African-American woman and a white man broke the racial barriers of that time. The song was by author Dolly Parton, but Whitney's version became one of the best-selling singles in history. Another hit that the album includes is I Have Nothing, which also reached the tops and was a sales success in 1993 and nominated as the best song in the Oscar Awards of that year. Parallel to the success and the work as an artist that did not stop prospering, Whitney allowed herself for love. The same year and after the premiere of The Bodyguard, the show was surprising, and Whitney married singer Bobby Brown. On July 18, 1992, the couple said yes in New Jersey. Bobby was a hip-hop singer and one of the biggest stars of R&B. The wedding was held at Whitney's house estate in New Jersey. Her $40,000 white lace dress with her cap worked over her head and Bobby dressed in the same color created a magazine postcard. They had met at the Soul Train Awards in 1989, an award event focused on African American artists where the singer annoyed Bobby by hitting him on the head to get his attention. Whitney invited him to her 26th birthday, and from that moment they got closer and stayed together. There is a pearl from that night, and it has to do with class and race issues, placing these terms, of course, 30 years in the past. Bobby Brown performed at this event, singing and dancing effusively, and was applauded like a superstar. But Whitney did not receive the same acceptance. When she was nominated for her single I Wanna Dance With Somebody, she was clearly booed and insulted. This had to do with the fact that while her roots were African American, she was too white to share that community. And this was a purely racial issue. The singer had become a marketing product who, in some way, due to her rapid rise and by surrounding herself with white artists, was betraying her people. But obviously this had never been her intention. Whitney, after getting married, became pregnant and in March of 1993 gave birth to her daughter, Bobbi Kristina, who would be her great companion from then on. It was known that before she started dating Bobby, the singer had a brief romance with Jermaine Jackson and actor Eddie Murphy, another bad boy from the entertainment industry. It's even said that this relationship continued sporadically while she already knew Bobby Brown, but that Murphy had stood her up, which hastened Whitney's decision to commit to her relationship with Bobby. On the other hand, Brown also continued to see his girlfriend and mother of his second child, the young Kim Ward. In fact, as proof of this, when Kim found out about Bobby and Whitney's engagement, she was already 2 months pregnant again. The couple was often caught by the paparazzi in compromising situations. He was their bad boy, and she had an impeccable career. At first it seemed like they had a balanced and healthy relationship, but as you know, sometimes appearances can be deceiving. Bobby appeared in Whitney Houston's world to shake things up. She had a completely controlled life. Her new husband would teach her to dance and let loose. He had grown up in the slums of Boston at his 12 years old. She had come across many experiences that the singer had not lived even closely. By the age of 23, Bobby was already a father of 3 children and had dozens of life anecdotes that, obviously, fascinated Whitney Houston. He had tried cocaine in his early childhood, but he had set out to get ahead, and he succeeded, becoming a millionaire who flaunted his belongings. But having married Whitney Houston overshadowed him, and he became the husband of, which Bobby could not bear. Whitney was to the general public a girl who had been raised in a religious family, who attended church, who participated in choirs, and who maintained a low and supportive profile. But there was a dark and deep reality that had been tormenting her for years. Whitney Houston began using drugs at 16 with her brother Michael. An adult gave them a bag with special contents, marijuana and cocaine. During the singer's artistic peak, Bobby's presence complicated things. It had become a risk since in matters of addiction, both were prone to accentuate that side that was supposed to be kept out of their lives. The marriage to Bobby was becoming publicly chaotic. They fought, lies surfaced, and drugs adorned their faces, punished by intense nights. That violence was visible, as was the case when the singer returned from her honeymoon. She had a 7-centimeter scar on her forehead, the result of what was later known to be a domestic fight. Bobby had thrown a glass at her face. She was the center of attention for journalists, and whenever they could, they overshadowed her fame with truths that were coming to light. It was known that minutes before her wedding, she was seen snorting a line of cocaine, the same during the filming of the movie The Bodyguard. But the singer was not only the talk of the town because of her proximity to drugs, but also because her sexual preferences were being questioned. Whitney had a trusted friend who accompanied her throughout her career. Robin Crawford was her right hand and even became her assistant. Their relationship began in 1980 when they met at a summer camp in New Jersey. Whitney was 17 years old and Robin was 19. They promised to take care of each other, and from there they were inseparable. But at the moment when the singer's career took off, their relationship had to end because they thought it could turn against them. Homosexuality in the 80s did not enjoy the same freedoms that exist today. Although Sissy, Whitney's mother, believed that the relationship between 2 women was not endorsed by the Bible. For them, there was no label of sin, of lesbianism, or anything strange. They simply loved, cared for, and looked after one another. But going back to the 90s, while Whitney Houston's image was fading due to her public appearances looking thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, disheveled. This detail from his past and his fondness for women did not play in his favor. The singer was devastated, trapped in the toxic relationship she had with Bobby and the use of drugs. In the midst of all this was her daughter Bobby, neglected and keeping pace with her mother. The poor girl was going through a difficult childhood given her parents' addiction problems and the domestic violence she was witnessing. Bobby had appeared in an edition of an American Music Award being held up while her mother sang on stage. From that moment on, he became a public figure. By the mid-90s, Whitney had done the Cinderella musical, produced by her own company, and won an Oscar in 1998 after having sung with Mariah Carey, When You Believe, a single that was included in the animated film The Prince of Egypt. In 2000, she released Whitney The Greatest Hits with the main hits from her 15-year career. In the following years, she continued to release albums, often singing with other colleagues such as Enrique Iglesias and George Michael, reaffirming herself as the #1 in sales. As time went by, around 2002, Whitney was more familiar with the media and publicly acknowledged that she was abused by Bobby, her husband, and admitted to drug use. But someone would reappear from the darkness. The ghost of her father. John Huston sued his daughter for the sum of $100 million. When his daughter reached fame, her father quit his job in the civil service to take charge of her career, managing the accounts and closing the contracts. It is rumored that during all that time, John stole a lot of her money, and when she found out, she fired him. In retaliation, he sued her for an alleged commission from a contract that he himself had closed before the year 2000. It was very hard for the singer, who finally decided never to see him again. In 2003, John died, and Whitney did not go to his funeral. She had not been able to forgive him. Thus began a new stage for the singer, a stage in which she decided to admit herself and prioritize her health. She truly wanted to get off drugs. In March 2004, she admitted herself to a recovery center for addicts. She asked her loved ones and fans to pray for her and support her in this important moment. She stayed for 5 days and immediately started an international tour. She was hospitalized again the next year, but for a period of 2 months. She struggled to get through the detoxification stage. She spent large amounts of money on medication to calm the anxieties caused by distancing herself from drugs. Her mother once said in an interview that she was afraid she would end up with an overdose due to the relapses she was going through. Nothing could be further from what was about to happen. She kept away from public appearances and reappeared at the end of 2006 with her producer Davies. In April 2007, she divorced Bobby Brown and gained custody of their daughter. She continued recording albums and touring, breaking the records she was accustomed to. In the year 2020, she became the first African American artist to achieve 3 diamond albums. In February 2012, the Grammy Awards party was scheduled. On February 9th, Whitney had been rehearsing with other singers for the event. That night, she sang with Kelly Price in her final public singing appearance. On February 11th, she was found unconscious in the bathtub of her room at her Beverly Hills hotel. Initially, the causes were unknown. It was only known that she was submerged in the bath while her bodyguard and hairdresser were in the room waiting. The hairdresser went to check on her as she was taking too long and found her there. They called the medical services, and when they arrived, they performed their respective cardiopulmonary resuscitation maneuvers for 20 minutes, without success. Whitney Houston passed away at the age of 48. After the autopsy, the sad fate of the singer would be revealed. Cocaine and other types of drugs such as Benadryl, cannabis, Xanax, and Flexeril were found. These substances combined with alcohol caused the singer to fall asleep and drown without any reaction. Another fact that emerged from the autopsy was that her nasal septum was perforated as a result of frequent cocaine use. Days after Whitney's death, her daughter Bobby collapsed and was hospitalized. She also had problems with addiction and relapses. 3 years after the voice of one of the world's most recognized singers was silenced, Bobby Brown died after having been in an induced coma for 6 months. For thousands and thousands of admirers, especially in the United States and in Black communities, the legend of Whitney Houston is untouchable and stands firm at the top of music. That concludes today's video on the life and death of Whitney Houston. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Check out the suggested videos to continue watching. Until next time, this is Magnum Ephisto signing off. Goodbye.